Russia-Ukraine news. Putin's new trans ban is only the latest salvo in a worldwide campaign on LGBTQ+ rights. Since the beginning of the Russian invasion in February 2022, Putin has claimed that Russia is fighting not only Ukraine, but also Western principles. In a speech commemorating the unlawful annexation of 4 Ukrainian areas in September, he called the radical denial of family values and support of LGBTQ+ rights in the West pure Satanism. Russia's already marginalized LGBTQ+ minority has been targeted by new legislation supported by the Kremlin. Putin signed a bill on Monday, the 24th of July, prohibiting gender-affirming healthcare for trans persons and identifying as the opposite sex on government forms and other public records. In addition to banning trans individuals from adopting or fostering children, the Nasty Law, which was voted overwhelmingly by both chambers of parliament, also declares null and void any marriage in which either partner disclosed their transgender status. The Russian subsidiaries of 2 European firms have been placed under temporary management by Kremlin loyalists, per a directive signed by Russian President Vladimir Putin. There appears to be a considerable increase in the risk of expropriation of assets in Russia belonging to enterprises situated in nations deemed unfriendly to Russia. When deciding whether or not to leave Russia, businesses that have had assets seized or are at risk of having assets seized need to take export controls and sanctions into account. Putin signed a decree taking the Russian subsidiaries of Danone SA, a French food products business, and Carlsberg A.S., a Danish brewery, on July 16, 2023, saying that the assets were being placed under the temporary administration of individuals loyal to Putin. According to reports, Yakub Zakariev, the Deputy Prime Minister and Agricultural Minister of Chechnya, has taken leadership of Danone Russia JSC, while Carlsberg A.S.'s Baltika Brewing Company is now led by Teimuraz Boloyev, who is said to be a close buddy of Putin. Putin's directive from April 25, 2023, providing for the administrative receivership of assets in unfriendly countries, 1. In retribution for the seizure of Russian property by such countries, provided the legal basis for these acts. At the same moment that this decree was published, the Russian Federal Agency for State Property Management, Rosamushchestvo, received shares in the electric power distribution company Unipro from the German firm Uniper SE and shares in Fortum Russia BV from the Finnish energy company Fortum Oyj. Despite the Russian government's increased use of asset seizures, hundreds of enterprises from unfriendly countries continue to operate in the country. Export controls and sanctions are among the many areas of law that could be affected by the confiscation of assets. Transferring assets. Implications for export control. Despite having been lawfully exported to the Russian subsidiary, hardware, including manufacturing equipment, software, and related technology in the ownership of firms from unfriendly countries, could be subject to U.S. export regulations. It may be necessary to get an export license before transferring or retransferring products controlled by the U.S. Export Administration Regulations, EAR, to individuals located in Russia. For export controls compliance purposes, companies still doing business in Russia should compile inventories of such products or, at the very least, be able to describe the nature and scope of such items to U.S. government regulators in the case of an inquiry or investigation. A voluntary sale could necessitate an export license from the Department of Commerce's Bureau of Industry and Security, BIS, and most license applications are automatically denied. The effects of sanctions on the seizure and transfer of assets. Sanctions violations may also include forced transfers of assets involving targeted individuals. In the event that U.S. sanctions are at play, affected corporations may apply for a license from the Treasury Department's Office of Foreign Assets Control, OFAC, or seek authorization from other sanctions authorities, assuming there is adequate time. However, approval of such a permit is quite improbable. Asset seizures in violation of export control laws and related sanctions. Companies whose assets are covered by the EAR and have been forcibly transferred to a Russian person should consider submitting a voluntary disclosure to BIS if the transfer required an export license, even though violations of export controls resulting from asset seizures could hardly be framed as willful conduct in the absence of contrary guidance from BIS. Similarly, if a sanctioned individual was engaged in the asset seizure, affected companies should consider whether or not to make a voluntary notification to OFAC. How U.S. authorities react to such a disclosure may depend significantly on what a corporation does, or doesn't do, as these dangers become clearer. The way forward for businesses in Russia. Any company still doing business in Russia runs the risk of having its assets expropriated or sold in a fire sale by the Russian government. In order to prepare for the possibility of U.S. sanctions, export controls, and other legal and business issues, they should speak with counsel about potential courses of action. Foley Hoag has helped many businesses, both those looking to enter Russia and those hoping to leave the country in a legal manner. 1. The following countries and territories have been previously labeled as unfriendly by Russia: Albania, Andorra, Australia, Canada, all countries in the European Union, Iceland, Japan, Liechtenstein, Micronesia, Monaco, Montenegro, New Zealand, North Macedonia, Norway, San Marino, Singapore, South Korea, Switzerland, Taiwan, the United Kingdom, the United States, and Ukraine. For further information on this topic, you can view TASS's Russian Government Approves List of Unfriendly Countries and Territories, March 7, 2022, online at